After more than a year of staring each other down, Justin Jefferson and the Minnesota Vikings have come to a deal, but who won the negotiation? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who listen to the Locked On Vikings podcast each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. Thank you again. And a special hello if you are new here. If you're listening to Locked On Vikings for the first time, what's up? Welcome. My name is Luke. You can find Locked On Vikings anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings. You can also find it on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Today on the show, usually it's Tuesday, and that means we would do Twitter Tuesday, where it would be a mailbag episode, and I'd do a big Q&A. But we've got a big thing to talk about, so we're going to do it a little different. We'll do the mailbag later in the week, of course, so please keep your questions in mind, or you can always submit them to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or put a Google form, an entry into the Google form in the show notes. But for now, let's talk about it, the Justin Jefferson extension. So I'll give you the contract details and my understanding of kind of what both sides seemed to want here, and maybe we can kind of make a judgment. This happened early yesterday morning, so I imagine you've had some time to digest what you feel about like the $35 million number. If you want a more instant reaction, you can go check out the Minnesota Football Party, which is also on the Locked On Vikings feed. So if you're an audio listener, you already saw it pop up on your feed, but on YouTube, you go over to Locked On Minnesota Sports, and you can find it there. For like a more instant reaction to this, I basically like woke up, saw the news, and went and recorded that show. So I had like very little time to think about it. But since that, we've gotten our hands on like full total details with void years and stuff, and like Over the Cap has put together all the math, so we know the cap hits, the real cap hits, and what they will be. So for 2024, Justin Jefferson's cap hit will go from that $19 million figure that was his fifth-year option down to $8.6 million. This is a very standard thing to do when you sign a contract. There's a big signing bonus. You might as well roll some of that salary into it because there like will be a signing bonus. They could have front-loaded this like a lot more if they really wanted to, but they're going to have a couple of years where Justin Jefferson is pretty cheap on the cap, and then his money like explodes in 2026. Super Rob Brzezinski-y way to put a contract together. This is basically how he always puts his contracts together. The big money is always 2 years after you sign the deal. So we're pretty standard territory in terms of actual structure. But if you want the numbers, here you go. $140 million in total contract value, 88.7 fully guaranteed at signing, including a $37 million signing bonus and a $30 million option bonus in 2025, which is also fully guaranteed. Essentially, you can think of that as 30 mil in like salary that got restructured that we're just doing ahead of time instead of seeing the news next year that they restructured $30 million of Justin Jefferson's salary. They just kind of already have worked that into the deal, and it is essentially money guaranteed to him at signing that I believe will kick in 2025. That might be, it's a weird way to structure it. That might be for cash flow reasons. Which you don't have to care about. That's for like the Wilf's bank account and like accounting reasons. And it doesn't change anything about the actual compensation. Just know that it is $30 million spread out over 2025 through 2029, which 29 is a voided year that Jefferson wouldn't be under contract for, but obviously can be extended into. So you've got that. You've got small salaries this year and next year, and then his base salary, real base salary, kicks in big time. It's guaranteed in 2026 fully, and then 27, 28, the guarantees go down a little bit, and that's going to probably be a time where Jefferson's good. If there haven't already been restructures to help out the cap, which Jefferson would probably want a lot because it gives him more security, makes it harder to cut or trade, then you probably would just see it in 2027 restructures or some kind of rework to give Justin Jefferson a little bit more security. But for 3 years at least, this is secure. This is not going anywhere. He's going to see all that money. And honestly, it is structured in such a way where I don't think it's going to stay just 3 years. So If you were like me and you wanted Justin Jefferson to stay in Minnesota for 5 years beyond today, congratulations. That looks extraordinarily likely. This contract is definitely not fake, and it doesn't like crazy inflate at the end like a lot of contracts do. The Vikings have kind of stopped doing that, and the money that they give is a little bit more real. And they've instead kind of gotten what they want in terms of flexibility and options. But there's not a lot of flexibility here. Justin Jefferson is just going to see his money. That's going to be the way that this goes. Of 140 mil of it, 110 of it is guaranteed. Like, he's just going to see most of that money, if not all of it, if not more. Probably more, unless something goes really wrong in the next 3 years. That tells me that Justin Jefferson kind of got what he wanted. And that's great. There is a really instructive piece at Wide Left. Hate to give Arif props, but I have to. He wrote a really good piece kind of breaking down the contract structures, and a few like key figures from it are that if you look at the average annual value of 35 mil, all of these numbers are record breaking, by the way. $140 million contract, 35 mil a year. That's the most ever for a non-quarterback. And crucially, that guaranteed at signing number, that fully guaranteed number, 88.7, just barely edges out the record for that fully guaranteed at signing number for non-quarterbacks, which was held by Nick Bosa, who has the same agent as Justin Jefferson. And it's very clearly designed such that the agent can say, a second time, I got my player the most guaranteed money ever for a non-quarterback. Like, that's a selling point, right? So that's another thing that Justin Jefferson wanted that he got. That is a lot easier to accomplish when you're negotiating in a cap environment that has exploded by 25% in the last 2 years. That is an insane amount of inflation. 25% in 2 years absolutely has broken the NFL economy, and tons of money is going out left and right in all these super startling and astounding numbers. So you kind of have to look at it as a percentage, right? What resources were the team working with? Like, what were they using to get this done, and how much of that did they use? And if you use that as a metric, percentage of cap in the year that the deal was signed, to sort of adjust for that inflation, it ranks still very high. I think it's like the second deal ever, but it ranks below Tyreek Hill's deal. Tyreek Hill, who's making less money, but signed that in a world where his team had less money to spend, and it was like 14%. The exact figures are in the Wide Left article. Go read that. It was 14% of the cap in the year that Tyreek Hill signed versus, I think, 13% for Justin Jefferson. The deal also kind of feels like it's going to age pretty well. Real money isn't going to kick in until 2026. He'll make $38 million in 2026. And that's his cap number. His will be $38 million in 2026. It's projected to be 13.7% of the cap. So by year 3, it will be 13.7% of the cap. That would be the highest amount this year. If he made 13.7% of the cap this year, that would be the highest that anyone is making in whatever stage of the contract that they're in. But more wide receiver contracts are going to hit in the next 3 years that could totally warp what that number means. So it does seem like this is going to age pretty well. So I think the conclusion that I'm coming away with here is that, yeah, Justin Jefferson kind of got everything that he wanted. He got the guarantees, he got the security, he got the numbers to say what his agent wants them to say. Kind of seems like Justin Jefferson won the negotiation. But I don't think the Vikings are going to have any problem with that at all, because this contract still looks like it's going to age pretty well. And you get Justin Jefferson. Paying guys is important, and I think we forget that too much. So I kind of want to have a little bit of a come to God moment with everybody. That'll be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the best place to find last-minute tickets, whether you live perhaps in the Dallas or Boston area, you're trying to get to the NBA Finals, or if you're trying to get to NFL games, you can get tickets to them. Those are already on sale and available, so you can find whether it's the home opener or the London game or the home Packers game. That's always a big one. You can find it all at Gametime, and they have the lowest price guarantee. So if you find the same section and row for less, whether it is a football game, a baseball game, theater, comedy, whatever, if you find the same section and row for less elsewhere, tell Gametime about that. They'll credit you 110% of the difference. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. And when you're done here, if you want more Minnesota sports action, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports. Go to their YouTube page, click on their live tab, and you can find a live stream 24/7 Minnesota sports talk all day long. So here is the thing about this Justin Jefferson deal. It is exactly what we've been. If you've been listening to Locked On Vikings, no part of this should surprise you. The $35 million a year number has been kicking around forever. I've gone on a lot of different shows, whether they're radio shows or other Locked On shows, asking about, hey, what's going to happen to Justin Jefferson? He's going to sign for 34, 35 at some point. And that was just like going to be the deal. So that average annual value number was, I think it had been leaked because it had been like around, the idea had been in the ether for so long that it eventually just started leaking. So it shouldn't surprise you at all. But there were still a lot of people that were like, are they going to really pay Justin Jefferson that much money? And I've been trying to implore people for a long time on this show to reassess what you think a lot of money is all the time, or rethink how you determine how much money is a lot of money and not just the raw dollar amount. That's why I always do that weird roundabout percentage of cap in year signed kind of thing. And it is a big contract. Of course it is. And he's super worth it. And I'll get to that in a sec, but understand, if I hear people say Justin Jefferson is making quarterback money, you're just wrong. That's not quarterback money. If you want to sign a quarterback right now, you got to pay him $50 million. He's making what quarterbacks made 2 or 3 years ago when the cap was like 80 to 75% of what it is now. That's not the same thing. That's less money. You just think it's QB money because you haven't gotten used to the new numbers yet. In the new market yet. And guess what? It's just going to keep happening. So you got to learn just how to like recalibrate all the time. That's just part of it. So assuming we can do that, we that doesn't mean that Jefferson is secretly cheap. And I don't even think I could call the deal team friendly. I think it's going to look pretty good in hindsight. Just the way the cap is going up and this deal doesn't seem to inflate enough. That I guess that's where I'm at, right? Like you see the cap hits that go 38 and then 43, 47. I think the cap will inflate more than the deal inflates. Like just looking at recent trends and knowing that there's like a lot of big gambling money coming in, like that is just going to change things. So that's why I say I think the deal will age well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a team friendly, like he took some bargain. He didn't take a bargain at all. He got everything he wanted. Hooray. Everybody's happy. But he is really worth it. And I think we forgot in all of this that Justin Jefferson's really freaking good at football. And the thing that has driven me nuts throughout this whole thing, outside of all the really bunk trade rumors that people tried to get your attention with, I apologize because sometimes I had to address those, but I really never wanted to because I think that it was always stupid, and obviously so. And I would come on the show and say that. But so look at where you get your news. Maybe audit that. But I think the idea that's maybe more worth responding to is the idea that like wide receivers are so abundant that they're not worth money anymore. And that just is pretty demonstrably false. The NFL just doesn't see it that way at all. Like maybe you want to make some crazy argument that the NFL should stop paying its wide receivers or whatever, and you can go ahead and do that, but receivers cost a lot of money. There is no world in which your favorite team gets to be the team that says, I'm not going to pay out my wide receivers and get super rewarded for it by still getting good receiver play somehow. It's not happening. If that guy's good, you got to draft him high and you have to pay him a lot of money. Receivers are just valuable, and there's a lot of analytical arguments for that too. So it's not even really a take rooted in any like statistics or analytics or any like sound math. I think it's a take just rooted in a misunderstanding of the idea of scarcity. Receivers themselves, depth receivers and stuff might not be so scarce. That's why guys like Brandon Powell don't cost a lot of money, even though they might be wide receiver 3. Justin Jefferson's are scarce. He's one of one. He's the best receiver in the league. Pound sand. There's I'll link the Arif piece. Maybe I'll try to talk to him too about it on this show. We'll see if he wants to. But The crux of it comes down to double teams and the way that Jefferson like attracts so much attention that it makes everybody else's job easier, which if you watch the Vikings, you can absolutely see that trend. But, putting it into objective terms is always helpful. And it's really astounding just how much attention he receives and how productive he still is. I talked about this on Locked On NFL a little bit on Tuesday, which I'm always on. So good day for me to be on Locked On NFL anyways. But the way that Jefferson approaches running routes, it takes what I think can be kind of a science. If you're going to break inside, you want to stem your route to a little bit to the outside. You want to do this kind of release. And here's, the best way to carve the route downhill if it's a, 90-degree route. And all these little things that are pretty accepted wisdom. Some things are debatable as always, but there's a lot of parts of route running that are a science. And with Justin Jefferson, he turns it back into an art. I think that's beautiful. I think the game is more beautiful when you're watching Justin Jefferson play it. So if you're worried about nickels and dimes, and what about if they can't sign a better wide receiver because they're paying Justin Jefferson too much money, you need some fresh air. You've lost the plot. You cannot win in the NFL with a team full of mediocre players on efficient deals. You can't do it. That just makes you a really cost-efficient 8-9 team. You don't want to be that. If you want to achieve greatness, you need to choose to have some greatness. That feels like a truism, right? Like I shouldn't have to say that out. You need greatness to have greatness. Yes, of course. But we kind of forget that greatness is worth it. And you're never going to replace Justin Jefferson in the aggregate. I think if I could go back in time, I would give Brad Pitt food poisoning the day he auditioned for that movie. Because I think it gave us all a really wrong idea about stardom in sports. Sports are driven by superstars. It's the dudes that the other team can't answer that drive this thing forward. It's not replacing them in the aggregate. All that stuff matters. Depth matters. It's worth talking about, and it's worth a certain amount of money, and it's worth spending time on the podcast talking about later in the show, we're going to do the Everyman series, which I'll explain for the new viewers, but it's worth your time to think about those guys. But make no mistake, whether or not the Vikings win or lose hinges on Justin Jefferson. And don't tell me about how they managed to eke out a whole bunch of crazy wins last year without him. That was very cool. Good for them. But this team is better with Justin Jefferson, bar none. And if you don't believe me, you just have to look harder. So it's worth it. And he costs what he costs. You don't get to live in a world where you get Justin Jefferson, but you only pay him $28 million a year and you feel like you're getting a huge bargain, which, by the way, would be an insulting thing to even offer. 28 mil. That would be disrespectful. You don't get that. You get him for 35 or you don't get him at all. And I'm going to tell you right now, that first team has a way better chance to win it all. So that's where I'm hitching my wagon. Next up, we're going to do the Everyman series on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's number one sportsbook, and you can start laying down your thoughts, your grambles on maybe what the Vikings will do this year. Look, the Vikings are 5th in Super Bowl odds. They're dead last in NFC North odds. If you think the Vikings have any chance at all at a modicum of success, there's probably an over that you will like. So go check out FanDuel. And if you're new, you can sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon and get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Lay down $5 on whatever you want to lay down $5 on, whether it's super, super short, minus 1,000 odds, or something a little bit more standard, like an over-under or a home run prop or something. If you win, you get $150 back in bonus bets to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Once again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. To wrap out this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, we're going to do the Everyman series, which is a daily thing right now on the Locked On Vikings podcast. It's a yearly tradition where we go over every new Vikings backstory, how they got to the NFL, how they got to the Vikings, and the person that adventure made them into. Try to focus a little bit more on the human side of the NFL. And today I want to start in McHenry, Illinois in 1997, where a 3-year-old is celebrating his birthday. And it's Illinois is deep Bears country, but he is wearing a Brett Favre jersey and he's got a Packers themed cake. Because for whatever reason, this little kid has not like dove into the team loyalties that so many young boys did in the 90s. But instead, he is enamored by quarterbacks, and in particular, Brett Favre, who he has watched with his family play against the Bears all this, every year of his life. And for whatever reason, that's the man on TV that the 3-year-old has latched onto and become a big fan of. And he would throw the Nerf ball around all the time. He was quarterback. That's what he wanted to be. And his parents wanted to nurture that. So from an early age, he was encouraged with his quarterbacking and he was supported unbelievably by his parents, Bob and Tammy. And by 4th grade, he's playing youth quarterback. That is the origin story for Robert Tonyan, the tight end. Major love for quarterbacking at an early age. But you also have to understand the Tonyans as a family. This is a classic Americana story. Guy comes in from, the family emigrates from Germany. They come in and start a business. It turns into a chain of businesses, but they are focused mostly on construction. Just the most blue collar of blue collar. Like we came with a nickel in our pocket and a dream and made this whole lineage. And Tonyan is a descendant of that. His grandfather founded a construction company and then eventually gave that company to Rob's father, Bob, Rob Sr., if you will. And he took over. So our Robert Tonyan's dad is now in charge of this company, and it is early 2008. Not a lot of construction happened that year, if you remember. The economy completely went belly up. So things got really tight for the Tonyans for a while. And that struggle, that familiarity with struggle happened at a formative enough age. He would have been 14, I think, at the time, that he really internalized that idea to, appreciate everything, never take anything for granted, and to be really okay with stuff being hard. And that's a really important skill when you're going to head to an NFL football field. Football is hard. It hurts. It makes you tired. It is very often really not fun. And that mentality is really easy for him to internalize. And it's because everything was hard work sometimes for him. He just got used to it. So Bob Sr. went to a fancy schmancy Catholic school in Illinois, but money was tight again. So Rob Jr. had to transfer out after, I think, 1 year and go to McHenry High School in Illinois, the public school. And eventually their fortunes would turn around as the economy kind of climbed its way back in. And they, when he was 16, they got him a car and everything that came from a dealership that they also owned and had opened. And it's truly a great success story of like American business. Like on a different kind of podcast, we'd be telling a totally different story. But the Tonyans now could really focus on fostering the athletic dreams of all of their children. For Robert, he was a stellar QB. He threw for thousands of yards. He was an absolute superstar at McHenry. But McHenry was just kind of the stupid little public school nobody paid attention to. They were like 6 and 13. They were unremarkable. No college recruiter is going to take the time to look at this program. There's way too many other programs going on around the country that are way more prestigious. So he wasn't going to get any eyeballs at all. And he got no steam from recruiters. There was nobody talking to anybody. So he started making cold calls. He would call up a recruiting office and he'd say, "Hi, my name is Robert. I would love it if you would go watch my highlights. This is the link to them on YouTube. And, I would really love to hear from you. I really like your program." And it was always personalized. It was never like a form letter or anything like that. But he would do that. And then his parents started writing emails and they just tried to get the word out there the best that they could. And they didn't get a lot of bites, but they did get a couple. The first one that came in was from Indiana State. And I think something about being first really, made him feel valued like so many other recruits do. Maybe I'm projecting other recruiting stories onto it, but regardless, that's where he goes with. Indiana State. He starts at quarterback at Indiana State as a true freshman. You got to understand that that is out of the norm. True freshmen, they redshirt all the time. There's usually another established quarterback in the building. You're sitting there trying to learn. Taking the job as a true freshman means you got the goods. First play, under center, finds a deep bomb, 57-yard touchdown. That's how he sets the tone at Indiana State. And at that moment, you're at the top of the world. Like, oh my God, I might be a quarterback. Like, this might work for me. I'm on a scholarship. This is fantastic. The rest of that season doesn't go as well, though. He kind of falls apart. The stats aren't great. And by the end of the year, Indiana State doesn't even view him as a quarterback anymore. They're saying, you know what, like we're somebody else is going to play here, and they're going to go into recruiting for quarterbacks. So he transfers into wide receiver. Eventually, he's realizing that he is too slow, especially if he has any dreams of playing at the next level. He's too slow to play wide receiver. So he's going to put on a little bit of weight, which is really hard. Eating was a chore for him. He was not the kind of, like, you hear about these O-linemen that are just like wolfing down 3,500 calories. Not for Tonyan. But again, what's hard, right? Who cares about hard? And to his benefit as well, his mother knows a guy who knows a guy, and that guy is CJ Fedorowicz, who you might remember if you were in some deeper fantasy leagues in the mid-2010s, who was a Texans tight end at the time, who he could like link up with. He got the same agent and kind of learned the position from an NFL guy, which helped him a lot. Through that, he actually will meet George Kittle and the Kittle family, and George Kittle and Robert Tonyan will become best friends. He's in George Kittle's wedding. Like, they are very, very close to this day. And all of those tight ends are friends, which I love. Like, all the Iowa guys, and then like some other tight ends that have like found them. All pals. I think it's the cutest thing in the world. But regardless, he ends up getting an opportunity with an NFL team, even despite being at the small school and being relatively new to the position. And it's Detroit, where he links up with maybe the best guy he could have linked up with at this moment, this very fragile moment in his career, Eric Ebron, who also made the transition from wide receiver to tight end. That could help him deal with that as well. It's an important formative experience for him, but he ultimately will not make the Detroit Lions. They tell him, we want you on the practice squad. He's happy with that. He's ready to sign his contract, but he never gets the contract, and he sits at home for most of 2017, which is his rookie season. Classic Lions of that era, total flub. And he's kind of sitting on the couch waiting for a call, basically, and he gets one from none other than his Green Bay Packers. He grew up a Packers fan, Brett Favre fan, and now he actually gets to go try out for them. So he flies over to I forget the name of their facility, but he flies over to the Green Bay facility. He does the workout and the meeting and everything like that, and he's ready to get his flight home to kind of await word. His flight's not for a little while, and they say, oh, you can just wait in the lounge. It's fine, no problem. Take mi casa es su casa. And he waits there, and he ends up dozing off in the lounge. And he is awoken by the news that he's not getting on that plane home. He's going to stay in Green Bay, and he's going to be a Packer. And he spends that season on the Packers practice squad. And in 2018, he'll actually show up and make the team. But there's a whole other story with that too, where he had a great camp and they told him, you're making the team, congratulations. And so he was like not bothered at all on cutdown day. He went home, he was playing video games, and he gets a text. He's sitting with Jake Kumaro, who's, Packers fans also know. And he's going, oh my God, they're telling me to like turn in my iPad. That means I got cut. What the heck? So he goes and drives down there. He's furious, and he sees his position coach, and they're like, oh, hey, Robert. Like, they're like happy to see him. And he's like, well, this is way too chipper. What's going on? And eventually they figure out that text was fake, but it was from a Green Bay area code. And they figure out eventually that it was another player on the Packers that was pranking him, which is maybe the most evil prank I've ever heard of. That player was never named, but whoever it is, the devil smiles on you. But the rest of the story you probably remember. We should stop just long enough to examine the 2020 game, Monday Night Football game against the Falcons, where he scores 3 touchdowns. His whole family, which, by the way, his family traveled tens of thousands of miles to watch not only his games, but all of their other children in sports. At one point, his mom actually quit a part-time job so that she could have more time to make sure that she attended every single game. The support system is very important to understanding this and the character of that support system. Ultimately, you know the rest of his career. He's got a respectable time with Green Bay. He gets another year tacked onto his like original practice squad, like restricted free agent deal, and then that runs out. He becomes a free agent, spends a very weird year in Chicago, and now he's here. So we'll see if this story continues. There's not really any reason other than age to maybe wonder if it will or not. But I mean, that tight end room, especially without TJ Hawkinson, is wide open. Let the chips fall where they may. Tomorrow we'll continue with more Justin Jefferson stuff. We'll do a mailbag probably. I'll put out the call on Twitter, so keep an eye out for that. But just get your questions in with the Google form or on the email address, and I'll get to them whenever we get to them. It'll be sometime this week. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skol.